Hi, my name is John McDaniel, and this is how Caesar's death led to the fall of the Republic. Introduction. Why was one man so powerful, and why did his life and death have such a huge impact? Basically, what this informational speech is trying to portray to you is how the death of just one man, Julius Gaius Caesar, or actually Gaius Julius Caesar in the Roman format, led to the fall of an ancient republic that had lasted since the monarchy of Rome. Basically, when he lived, he had gained so much political and militaristic power that his death ended up setting off a chain of events that eventually led to his adopted son, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, to become the first ever emperor of Rome, which would then last for a debated amount of time, but eventually evolving into the Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, and probably the most powerful country to ever exist. Caesar's death led to the fall of the Republic due to the power vacuum he left behind. Once he died, someone had to fill the role he previously had occupied in the government as the chief of basically every office in Rome. The opening of his will empowered Octavian. After he died, when his will was read, he entrusted many things to Octavian, including adopting him officially as his son posthumously. And this just empowered Octavian and gave him the role of the heir to Caesar. And people allowed Octavian to claim all of Caesar's power once he had passed. And then the climate of mistrust and change he created. During Caesar's life, he was one of the most prolific reformers to ever live in any sort of governance, especially in ancient Rome. He reformed many things such as the bread and other taxes, as you can see from history.com. He was a major reformer, and this led to a lot of different mistrust in the government. Caesar's power vacuum. What you're seeing here is a chart of Caesar's armies. Pretty much as it goes from the top to the bottom, it is the years on the left side. You can see on the y axis, it is the list of the years. And then on the x axis, it is the armies and then the strength of each of these armies. So basically, like 1 through 47 is the amount of different legions he had under his control, and then the number inside each box is the strength of the legion, or how many men were in that legion. And so, as you can see, as time passed on, once he had any control over armies, his armies just continued to grow and grow until he was the commander of a majority of the Roman elite. He was loved by the people. He was a very popular reformer, as previously stated. And if you can look at different historical sources, such as Britannica, documents that he was loved so much by the people that during his funeral, they actually rioted and burned lots of Rome. He was treated as a king in all but name. Basically, whatever he said became law in the time leading up to his death, which is part of why they killed him. When he died, they opened the will. And this is vital because at the time of his death, he was one of the richest people in all of history. When he died, he had so much wealth that he passed on to Octavian, that Octavian was able to buy loyalty and trust from other politicians in Rome. If you can look at this chart here, you can see all of the land in green were the conquests of Caesar. This means that all of the riches and treasures that came from that, plus all other treasures that he gained throughout his time as commander, they were all personally his to own and to have. And it just goes to show how much wealth Caesar actually possessed. And this all just entrusted Octavian with the wealth and power he needed to rule the empire. Furthermore, the biggest thing Caesar did in his will is he quite literally gave Octavian his name and adopted him as his son. The reason historians refer to Octavius as Octavian after the will is to denote the change in name, but to the Roman people, his name literally became Gaius Julius Caesar after the Caesar you are all familiar with died. And he became the heir to the throne in so many ways that to the public of Rome, Octavian was now Caesar. He was the continuation of Caesar, and so they all backed him and got behind him, allowing him to gain more power until he eventually moved to make the empire in his name under Augustus Caesar. Finally, we look at the mistrust and change. And this was huge because, as previously mentioned, Caesar was a huge reformer, as you can see from different sources throughout history. He changed so many things, and he was a very powerful man. Many people loved him, but he had a history of changing long-time traditions, such as changing how senators were picked and changing how armies worked and other sorts of things. But you can also tell that that left a climate of change in the governance. And once he was killed, people wanted to continue his change posthumously and they wanted to continue on his work. Furthermore, he was killed during a Senate meeting, right? If you look at this chart, you can see that roughly about 10% of the entire Senate were directly involved in the plot to kill Caesar. Roughly 10%. That means that there is a good portion of the Senate that quite literally plotted to kill the man that the public so loved, which led to a deep mistrust in the Senate and yearning for something that they could trust, which ended up being Octavian. But what this chart doesn't show is that historical sources lead us to believe that over half of the Senate actually knew what was going to happen. They just weren't directly involved. So, though 10% were directly involved, a further 40 or so percent may have known about the plot and simply gone along with it. This meant that the people needed something to replace Caesar with that wasn't the Senate, because if the Senate would kill the person that they so loved as their great champion of the people and reformer, they needed to find a new source of that power. In the end, a republic that lasted for hundreds of years from the time of Tarquin to the eventual rise of Octavian and Augustus, it was all just set in motion to topple with just the death of one man. Such a very strong republic ended up being felled by just one single action that happened in the theater of Pompeii, killing Caesar and changing the world forever. My sources were the World History Encyclopedia, History.com, Britannica, New York, National Geographic. Thank you.